morning everyone and welcome to this video. As you may know, my name is Magui and I'm a Stop Pilates certified instructor. In the last week or so, I've been talking to colleagues and doctors and physiotherapists, and they have all mentioned that they've been having patients with problems in injuries in knees or lower back or shoulders from doing workouts at home. Sometimes when we do our workouts in the comfort of our house, we don't have enough feedback in front of us to see if we're actually doing the right movements or if we are applying the right concepts in the workout. So I thought about doing this video in which I will just guide you through a few exercises, just the most common regular ones, and I will just pinpoint a few things to take into consideration when we're doing those exercises. Things to do, things not to do, and how we should be feeling through them. So hopefully when you're at home doing those exercises, you can remember these little things and try and make sure you're following those guidelines. All right, so I'm gonna get started. I'm just gonna move this to the side. And we are gonna start with squats. Squats are something that we normally do in any kind of exercise. It doesn't have to be necessarily a Pilates class. So I'm just gonna start with a squat with legs in parallel. So we want to make sure hip bones and the legs are following right under those hip bones, straight line right under. Now, if we look at our squats from the front, what we want to make sure here is that when we're doing that squat, we are keeping the knees, the ankles and the hip in that straight line. It's very common sometimes when you do the squats that you open the knees or maybe you close them, you bring them together. So we want to make sure as we go down, as we're bending those knees, everything is staying in that straight line if we look at it from the front. Now, I'm going to turn around so you can see from the side a couple of other points. So basically the squats, what we do is we think about bringing the sit bones back and behind. That will be a normal movement for the squat. So we think about like sitting down on a chair. So we go down and back. Now, when we do this movement, we want to think about a few things. We're going to start from the top. So the shoulders should stay in the same line as the heels. So exactly as we are standing up. So we bring the sit bones behind, but we want to keep those shoulders almost in line with the heels. As much as we can always, that's the aim. We might not be doing a perfect 100% squat, but we're trying to aim to get it the best possible. So that's important about the shoulder. When we squat, stays in that straight line with the heel. Good. Now, when we go about the hip and here the hinge of this hip and the upper body, what we want to do is we don't want to bring the sit bones right behind like that and arching that lower back. That's going to bring you a lot of pain into that lower back. So we're staying on a straight upper body and we're just hinging. So we're just thinking about bringing that behind, and the upper body obviously is going to go forward just to counterbalance the weight, because if we stay straight and we bring the glutes behind, we're just going to fall back. So it's just counterbalancing that weight and we're hinging here. We're not pushing out and bending over that lower back. We're staying on a neutral position on that lower back and we just hinge at the hip. Good? Excellent. And one thing to take into consideration about the knees, when we go down into that squat, we want to try and keep the knees right on top of the ankles as we go down. Now, it's really, really hard to keep exactly right on top of the ankles. That's normal, it's really hard pretty much for everyone. But what we want to make sure is that those knees don't go all the way to the front, over the line of the front of the feet. We want to try and keep them as much as we can on top of those heels. Obviously they can slide a little bit to the front, but let's try and keep them back as much as you can. And then when you're hinging like this, you want to see, if you can, that the knees are following through the middle of the foot. We think about the knee following around between the second and the third toe. We're not going to be that specific every time we do a squat, but try and think about that, because that's going to help you as well with that front alignment of keeping the knees right in the same line as the hip and the feet. So somewhere in the middle of the foot. Now, when we do squats as well, you want to work out sometimes maybe with some props. We can have the flex band around on the outside, or you can have a ball to squeeze on the inside to work different parts of that leg. That's okay, just as long as you make sure that you're following these guidelines when you're using those props for those exercises. Good, let's move on to lunges. So, for a lunge, let's go into a normal lunge position here. Front leg. We want to keep the front leg the knee right on top of the ankle. Again, it's the same as we just did with the squats. We don't want that knee to push forward and go over that front foot. So we want to try and keep it as much as we can, the knee right on top of the ankle. Now, we have our base of support here. The base of support will be the 2 feet, the 2 foot. So the distance between them, that is the width of our base of support. We want to try and keep that upper body in the middle of that weight, of that base of support. So we want to keep that upper body straight and going down and up, staying always in that middle position. Because if we hinge forward, then we can fall forward. If we hinge back, obviously we're going to fall back. So we want to try and keep that upper body straight and going up and down right there in the middle, in between the 2 feet. And the last thing, the foot at the back, obviously with the heel high, and you're just bending that knee. We're trying to aim to get into that 90-degree angle as we go down to the floor and then all the way up, but it's not necessarily the case that we're all going to go all the way down to the floor. So as far as you can go, but always try to aim to that angle as you get down. Good. Now, from here, we're going to go down towards the mat, and we're going to do a couple of exercises down here. We're going to start just lying down, and I'm going to show you one thing that we normally do in Pilates, but you can apply it for quite a few exercises that are not necessarily Pilates exercises, so it's some information that is good to know. We call it the imprint of the pelvic position, so imprint of that lower back. And normally when you're lying down on the mat like this, you want to have a neutral pelvis. I don't know if you can see exactly from there. You have a little gap under your lower back. You have your hip bones in line with your pubic bone, and they're exactly parallel to the floor. And you have that little gap that I normally say you can have a blueberry under that lower back and you're not squeezing it. That is a neutral position for the pelvis. That is normally when we're standing up, we are having that neutral position as well. Now, the imprint position is when you bring those hip bones up towards the rib cage. What you use is your lower abdominals, the lower obliques. You use those muscles, you contract those muscles, and those hip bones are going to come up, and you're going to have a little bit of a lengthening on that lower back. Sometimes you can almost reach and touch the mat. It's not necessarily the aim, but it could happen. So practicing that imprint position, just by using those lower abdominals, that's what we want to aim, so that when we are in a different position, sometimes we're going to do this when we're standing up or when we're kneeling. So it's good to know what is the feeling of those abdominals contracting and bringing those hip bones up. So we're not using the glutes to push up, we're just going to use the lower obliques to go into that imprint position. That's going to bring you a little bit of a lengthening as well in that lower back, and that actually can feel really good as a stretch. So it might be a good idea as well to have that as a little stretch in your lower back. Now, down here as well, we can do a little bit of a stretch for the hamstrings. That's something normally we do after a good workout. So we want to have one leg down like this on the mat with the knee bent. The other leg, you're going to hug it towards your chest. And now from here, we want to extend that knee as far as we can go and bend it. You can feel that stretch on the posterior chain, hamstrings, and even glutes as well. So you keep moving, extension and bend, yeah? So we're gonna go into this movement without stopping. We don't want to just keep it there and have a passive stretch. We want to keep moving from one position to the other. Good, that's good one there. Another good stretch for your lower back is as you're lying down like this with that neutral pelvis, keeping the feet on the mat, you're just going to slowly let those knees fall down to one side and you see your hip is rotating. The important thing here is if the knees are following to the right, to keep the left shoulder down on the mat. If you feel like you can do a little bit more, you can lift the lower feet and put it on top of the other knee. You can have a little bit more of a stretch there and release and come back to the center. So towards the other side, you let the knees drop. Make sure the opposite shoulder is staying down on the mat and you can bring that foot on top of the knee to have a little bit more of a stretch. And you come back to center and you can repeat this as many times as you like so you can stretch through that lower back. Now, another stretch that we normally do in Pilates that is really good for your back is what we call the shed stretch. So having the legs, the knees a little bit wider than the hip distance apart, we're just going to sit on top of the ankles. And from there, we want to flex the upper body. So we want to make a C shape with the whole spine. You can have hands right in front of you there. And the aim is to press through the abdominals, pushing in. So you want to think about bringing your belly button towards your spine. So you're creating that C shape with your spine. When you're here, if you want, you can add a little bit of a side bend or side rotation here, so you can bring the hands to one side and come back to center and bring the hands towards the other side. Always keeping that C shape on your spine and come back to center, and then slowly, one vertebra at a time, we come back into that seated position. Now, we're going to go into a 4-point kneeling. This you probably know from yoga or even from Pilates, what we call the cat stretch. So from here we want to have the hands right under the shoulders, the knees right under the hip, and we're going to have the hands shoulder distance width and the legs hip distance apart. Now we want to make sure we have the right weight distribution, so you can rock back and forward a little bit there and try and see that you're having the same amount of weight distributed between the hands and the knees. Once you're there, you stop there in the middle, and what we want to do is, as we exhale, we're going to start rounding the whole back again, trying to go into that C shape that is going to make us stretch the whole spine. And we come back into that starting position. So we want to stay in this starting position. We don't want to bend through that lower back to go into that extension that is too much. That's not normally the position we're in. So we're going from the neutral into that flexion of the whole spine. And we come back into that neutral. Always pushing through the hands, making sure we're staying firm in that position. The head is almost as if someone is pulling from the back of your head, so we don't allow the head to sink down. We're keeping that head up there, and we just go into full flexion, and we come back to that neutral. That's another good movement for the spine. It feels really good going into that flexion. It feels the whole stretch of the spine there. Now, we're going to do one more exercise here down on the mat. So we're going to bring one leg right in front with the foot right against the other leg. And we're going to open the other leg to the side. So basically, the front leg is what we normally call like mermaid position. But I'm keeping the other leg right straight on the side. Now, how far to the side you're going to have it, that's going to depend on your flexibility. Some people might be able to have it right next to them. Others, like me, will having a little bit towards the front, and that's going to be depending on everybody. So from here, what we want to do is we want to have, if you have this position like this, so I'm flexing my left knee and I'm extending my right one, I'm going to have my right hand holding onto that left knee. The left arm is going to
go up as I inhale, and when I exhale, I want to side bend towards that leg. As you can see, I don't have a lot of flexibility here, but I can feel that stretch on my posterior chain of that right leg. That is what I'm feeling right there. And as you inhale, you come back, and exhale to bend over again. You're having a good stretch as well through the side of the body on the left side, and through that posterior chain on the right side. That is another really good stretch after a good workout. If you work through your abdominals or if you work the legs, that is a good stretch that involves both parts of the body. Good. We are going to go into an exercise that probably everybody knows, which is the plank, or we normally call it in Pilates the push-up position. So it's in the same position we're going to do push-ups, and all of the things that I'm going to tell you now, they do apply either for the plank or for the push-up as well. So things to take into consideration when we do a plank. We want to have the hips in a little bit of that imprinted position that I was telling you before, because normally people, when we're doing the plank, I will show you now, they go into that anterior pelvic tilt, and that's when you're sinking your hips down, and that's when your lower back starts to hurt. So we want to think about that imprint that I was telling you about. Think about bringing those hip bones up towards the rib cage. It's a very small movement, but that small difference is going to make your lower back hurt or not. Another important thing to have into consideration when you're doing a push-up or a plank position is about the shoulders and the shoulder blades. So when either you're in your elbows or in your hands doing that plank or push-up, we want to first find the neutral position through the shoulder blades, so we know we are in the right position before we start doing the exercise. So a couple of things that you can do before you do that is work a little bit through retraction and protraction. So having just the hands in front of you, go into retraction and protraction, just moving from the shoulder blades, not moving the arms or anything, but just through the shoulder blades, move them together and apart into that protraction and retraction until you find the middle point, which is the neutral position. And the same thing through elevation and depression. You want to move a couple of times through those shoulder blades until you find the middle point in between those two. If you want, you can go ahead as well and do a little bit of downward and upward rotation just by doing scissors with the arms, and you will find that neutral position in which you can hold there, then to go ahead and do the exercise. So one last thing to know about this push-up or plank position. So when you're going to go into that position, about the head, we want to keep the head in line with the rest of the spine. So we don't want the head to go and look up or look down, bringing the chin towards the chest. And we want to make sure as well that we are pressing the back of the head away. So we're thinking about pressing through that back of the head, so we're staying in line and we're not sinking through the head as we are staying in that position. So think about your ponytail or your hair being grabbed from behind you, so you're keeping that head aligned in there. Now, let's go down into that position and let's review how it looks and how it shouldn't look and how it feels, everything there. So if you're in your hands, make sure your hands are right under the shoulders. We want to be in one straight line, so the whole spine, the whole body, from the feet to the crown of the head is one straight line. Make sure you're going into that imprint. Make sure you're not letting your hips sink down. You're not allowing your hips to go into that anterior tilt right there. Go into that little imprint, and that will be your plank or your push-up position right there. Not sinking through the shoulders, not sinking through the head. Don't allow that to happen. Sinking through the shoulders and going into that retraction. Push through those hands, through those shoulders, right there. If you want to go down into those elbows, it's exactly the same thing. We want to think about having the elbows right under the shoulders, and the same thing is straight line from the crown of the head to the feet. Right there, don't allow the hips to sink down, so staying in that straight line into that little imprint. Good. And one important thing, if you're going to go into push-ups, is that we don't allow that the shoulder blade retraction is not the first thing that we do when we go into a push-up. So basically, when we are going into a push-up, when we are in that position, holding through there, what we want to do is we want to bend the elbows to go down, but we don't want to retract those shoulder blades to start the movement. So the first part of the push-up movement should be from bending the elbows. And then if you get to a certain point in which you need to start retracting your shoulder blades, then that's okay. But the first part of the movement should not be just from the retracting the shoulder blades and then bending the elbows. It should be the other way around. So let's put it into action so you can see better from there. So right here, what we want to do is we want to go down on the elbows and up. Down and up. We don't want to sink through those shoulders and then go down. It's actually a lot harder if you do that, because you have to use different muscles, which is not exactly what we are targeting when we're doing a push-up. So bear that in mind. Think about your shoulder blades. Think about how you're feeling around the shoulder blades before you go into that push-up, and think about keeping those shoulder blades exactly where they are. They're not moving, they're staying there as you're bending the elbows. And then eventually, when you get to a certain point, if they retract a little bit, that is okay. But try and make sure that's not the first part of the movement when you start that push-up. Good, I think this is it for today. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope you can get some useful tips out of this session. And if you have any comments or any questions, you can always go ahead and send me a message. All right, thank you very much for joining, and I will be seeing you in my next video.